Republican presidential candidates faced off in the fourth GOP debate in Tuscaloosa, Alabama last night. Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis both vying for a distant second place in the race. They certainly sparred last night. The Florida governor repeatedly calling out Haley's record. Tensions ran high with former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie calling entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, quote, obnoxious. Ramaswamy using a notepad to call Haley, quote, corrupt. And the elephant in the room once again, leading candidate, former President Donald Trump, sitting this one out as he has with all of the debates. So let's bring in Democratic political strategist Crystal Knight and Republican strategist Anna Mancuso. Ladies, welcome back to Scripps News Live. And I want to start with you, Anna, because the candidates were a little more feisty than usual, but again, none really willing to speak out against Trump. I mean, you had Chris Christie, who was really the only one directly attacking him. And apart from that, maybe you had Haley and DeSantis talking about his ability or, his past of adding trillions of dollars to the deficit, but they're really unwilling to criticize his record as president, let alone criminal cases that are pending against him. Why do you think that is?
Because they're both vying for a vice presidential spot. The truth of the matter is that their candidacy for president is not going to happen. They're trying to outdo each other as they head into Iowa. This was the last opportunity to be before the American electorate before Iowa takes place in January. But at the end of the day, when asked if Trump was fit to serve as president and if he won another 4 years, was he fit? Ron DeSantis failed to say that if he was not. He refused to. And Chris Christie asked him point blank, can you answer the question? He would not answer the question. So this tells me that at this point, this is merely an exercise for a cabinet position or a VP slot.
Quick follow-up here, because we just, recently got news of another debate being added, within the same week of Iowa's caucus. It's actually supposed to be taking place at Drake University, which is in Des Moines. I have to ask, would doing something like that there, apparently it's happening, move the needle at all, or not really?
They can't. Look, Trump can't be caught. He has a commanding lead, and even if they coalesced around one candidate, around Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis, or Nikki Haley, they're still not within striking distance of Donald Trump in the polls.
Now, Crystal, Trump's age came up, and it's a criticism that you usually hear against President Biden. He's 77, the president is 81. And DeSantis was asked if Trump was, quote, fit to be president. And he seemed to say indirectly that Trump's age would have an impact if he were to win another term. What are your thoughts on this whole conversation and the fact that it now entered a GOP debate?
Well, I'm glad that it actually entered the GOP debate, because we've heard this same, complaint or comment about President Biden, and truly there's no real appreciable difference between both of their ages. But the fact that DeSantis is unwilling to really just speak out against former President Donald Trump is sending a signal that I think Chris Christie was really skilled at calling out, not only with DeSantis, but with all the other candidates. I do think that if Donald Trump, becomes the nominee, he will be an aging, candidate, much like, President Biden. But again, they have alternatives. The party has alternatives to choose from right now, hence these GOP debates that are happening. So it'll be interesting to see ultimately what happens if, in fact, Nikki Haley does continue to rise in the polls as she is.
To that point, I'm going to ask you, and listen, Anna, I've got your thoughts in mind here. This is a big if, but most of the attacks, as we saw on the debate stage, aimed at Nikki Haley, and she responded at one point saying, I love all the attention, fellas. And it garnered a laugh from the audience. It's the quote that came out of the debate. If Nikki Haley had this surprise outcome where she won the party nomination, Crystal, how would the Biden campaign handle that?
Well, I think, they would begin to pivot and focus on her foreign policy. They begin to focus on some of the policies that she passed as governor of South Carolina. I also think that we, see the president now really trying to create a narrative around who could potentially be, his opponent, by stating that, if it wasn't for Donald Trump, he wouldn't be running. I don't necessarily agree with that statement, but I think if Nikki Haley is the nominee, President Biden is already declared, the campaign is already underway, and it's too late to, divert course.
Anna, Trump still the candidate to beat, of course, stating the obvious here. He's racked up 90+ charges, though. What is his campaign message at this point?
At this point, his campaign message is that he is all but the nominee, and he is looking forward to running against Joe Biden in the general election, and he's not worried about the debates. He doesn't have to show up to the debates, and it hasn't even hurt his poll numbers. He is right now having to work between his campaign schedule and his court schedule, and he will continue to do that. And unfortunately, at this point in time, this is the best the Republican Party can do because it is the party of Donald Trump.
And Crystal, President Biden losing favor among voters of color, losing favor among young voters. You mentioned the statement earlier in the conversation where he said, you know, he's running because Trump is running, and then kind of walked it back. With all of that going on, what is his message for re-election at this point?
Well, I think his message is, you know, what he's been able to do, pumping more money into the economy. The thing that I've been consistent with saying is that his administration and his team has to figure out the best messaging that will get across to voters. So the people that you just mentioned, young voters, voters of color, those are things that the president has to tout, like, you know, student loan repayment, you know, infrastructure bill or Inflation Reduction Act. Those are all things that help small businesses grow. And those are the things that the president has to focus on if he's serious about, you know, rising in the polls among his base of supporters.
Quick rapid round here before I let the two of you go, you know, because we're going to blink before we know it, it's 2024. So Mariana, what is the thing that you're focused on moving forward when it comes to this election?
The one thing that I'm really focused on is watching to see how the Latino vote moves forward and who they end up supporting in the general election.
Crystal?
I'm curious to see how top issues like the economy and abortion will play into the primary, you know, results, and then ultimately the general election.
Both fantastic points there. Crystal Knight and Anna Mancuso, both political strategists. Ladies, thank you for your analysis and perspective. We're always glad to have you.
Thank you.